Moonstone Minneapolis is a queer-owned, community-focused gift shop in South Minneapolis centered on curiosity, connection, and self-discovery. Explore astrology, tarot, crystals, herbs, mindfulness, and spiritual practices in a welcoming environment for all backgrounds and experience levels. Located at 3304 East Lake Street in Minneapolis, Moonstone Minneapolis also hosts makers markets, classes, and community events. Learn more at moonstonempls.com and discover a welcoming place to explore with curiosity and respect.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story. This is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I just want to say a quick thank you to Golden Valley Pride this past weekend. AM 950 was out there with a tent and a booth to celebrate the event. We did live broadcasts from there Saturday afternoon. It was a lot of fun. The weather was absolutely terrific, but the people, that's what it's always about. It's about the people and the people that came by, the excitement, the celebration, everyone being happy. I loved it. It was so much fun. It was so great. It was so gratifying to be able to take part in a small way. I love being an ally, and I was really happy just how wonderful the day was. And AM 950 is going to be back over at Twin Cities Pride in a couple weeks, having a booth. I'm actually going to be doing a live show on that Sunday with my friend Brenna, who owns Moonstone Minneapolis, and we're going to have a great program about it too. I was thinking about it yesterday as I was walking through the place. Every time I go to a Pride event, I just leave happy. I feel good. I leave happy. I feel really happy about everything. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited for that. Now, my guest tonight, talking with him, I could tell him that I am knackered right now because I am so tired. I think he'd get it. I'm sure a lot of you would get it as well. I'm always happy to have Richard Estep on. He has been so kind with his time, being on the program a few times over the years. And it's always great when he has a new book coming out. And tonight, we're going to be talking about a book that came out a couple months ago, and it's just always hard to kind of get schedules together and stuff. But this is a book worth talking about. It's called Monsters, Myths, Legends, and Real Encounters. And this is a big one, folks. This is a nice sized book, and we're going to talk about it today. Rchard, welcome to GhostBox Radio.
My pleasure. It's good to be back, Greg.
Thank you very, very much. Now, you get my attention at just the word monsters, and looking through this book, this seems to be, and I've read a good portion of it. This seems to be like a kind of a categorized look at certain type of entities that we might label as monsters. Am I kind of getting the gist of the book here?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm lucky in that when I work with some publishers, they give me a general idea for a project. And as a kid growing up, I would often get monster books under the Christmas tree. And they were called monster books back then. The word cryptid wasn't a thing. So, like the Hamlin Book of Monsters and things of that nature, the Usborne Book of Monsters. And so I used to delight in those kind of books. And then I got an opportunity to write a quote unquote monster book. And I'm like, that's fantastic, because I can put some of my favorites in there. Some of the stuff I read about 45 years ago, turns out doesn't hold so much water today. Yeah. Certain cases, certain things. And then I also wanted to leaven that book with a few perhaps lesser known, somewhat more obscure monster cases as well. So like the Fresno night crawlers, for example, which I basically think of as like a phantom pair of trousers. So, you know, they just set me loose and said, give us your take on monsters. And I had a blast writing it and researching it.
How did you go about researching it? Because there is a lot in here. And my first thought was that's got to take a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is I always try and put boots on the ground when I can. And realistically, you can't write a monster book without writing about the Bigfoot phenomenon to a degree. So I went squatching for the first time, which was an experience and a half, let me tell you. And to write about Mothman, of course, I went to Point Pleasant and followed that phenomenon across, you know, the American Midwest and places like that. So it was a real joy to do that. And then getting some more information, some updated information on like the Loch Ness Monster. You know, you're absolutely heartbroken to learn that what I always considered the gold standard of Nessie photos, the surgeon's photo, was an outright fraud. Because you say Loch Ness Monster photo, and that's the one everybody thinks of. It's been on how many documentaries, how many book covers. I even do my own imitation of it. Are you ready for this? This is going to blow you away.
Right.
It's that one, right? That's the picture. And of course, you learn that was basically a toy submarine with a rubber neck stuck on top of it. Kind of breaks your heart because the whole world was fooled by that. You know, so updating some of these cases was fun too. And the only thing that makes me a little sad is that the book went to press before we had this current explosion on the Patterson-Gimlin film.
That's a whole other conversation, isn't it?
That's probably a whole other book.
Yeah, truly. So we'll wait on that one until you write that and come back and talk about it. The thing about, I was thinking about this as well, is, you know, I'm growing up and I love the term monsters. In my mind, it has a connotation of it. And I think that that's something that was, implanted in me by stuff like the Universal horror films and stuff like that. And I'm not trying to be like PC about this or anything, but, you know, when you think of monsters, I mean, my first thought is always something like, you know, it's dangerous or they're going to want to get you or whatever else. That's not always the case, though, right?
You probably love the Monster Squad as much as I do.
Yeah.
The movie. Yes. What's the body count in that movie?
None, right?
And there you go, right? So we get that thrill, that chill. I think with monsters, there's this kind of idea of danger at first, but then when you look beneath the hood of movies like the Monster Squad, you realize that in fact the fear comes from the otherness of them. And there's been more than one good monster project in which it turned out that the human beings were the monsters, you know?
Yes.
You can make a case about E.T. very easily, and that's just off the top of my head. So I think that, monsters have this kind of, that's the thrill, right? You know, the idea that they have claws and a lot of them have fangs and things of that nature. And you wouldn't want to be in a room with an actual werewolf, of course, or a vampire, let's say. But if you believe those things, however, I also feel like a lot of the time, the joy of it is just how weird and different they are, you know. And as you pointed out, you know, the Universal monsters are fantastic. You're a fellow Anglophile, so the Hammer monsters, the exact same thing with probably a slightly lower budget. But, you know, as a British kid, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and the old tropes of Hammer are in my DNA pretty much. So I get to kind of incorporate those kind of perspectives too. And it fascinates me how, as a society and a culture, our relationship with monsters changes over time. You know, I mean, if you look at the vampire, for example, we've had the Bela Lugosi, you know, the cape and the mysterious stuff like that. We've had the absolutely horrific vampires of like the Blade movies, which are monstrous in appearance and form. We've had the glowing, sparkling Twilight vampires and everything in between. So I feel like some of these monsters change their form as our culture changes.
Yeah, I would say so. And also, like you had pointed out too, when you know, there is a side to what we would call monsters. Like I think of like Barnabas Collins, you know, that he doesn't want to be a vampire. He wants, Dark Shadows. He wants to, he rather not be a vampire. It's a curse. And what he's doing is out of survival now. And that there is something about that where, you know, it's kind of like, well, have we asked the monster their side of the situation? You know, it's just that. That's
if only we could interview a vampire, huh? But then
and Rice passed away, unfortunately. So
unfortunately, so. Although TV, she's still going strong. But you flip it, right? So you look at The Lost Boys, which is another kind of one of the great movies of the 80s. I love that movie. Still holds up really well. And I remember the tagline on the poster for that, sleep all day, party all night. It's fun to be a vampire. So you've got the same condition, and depending on where you're standing, it's either the best thing you can imagine or the worst curse of all time. Maybe both.
Maybe both, and then you get to the other extreme. And if we're going to talk about vampires at all, I do have to bring up, Salem's Lot, the 1979 TV version where Barlow is nothing but a monster. Truly, in every sense of what we think of that genre, and we love that too. Though we love that sort of portrayal as well. So
and then you get a little more nuanced. And I talked about another of my favorite movies, Fright Night, in which you see Evil Ed, played by Stephen Jeffries, before his career took a very interesting turn. And he's seduced by the idea that he's the bullied kid. And I think everyone that watches Fright Night, or at least certainly when I was a bullied kid, I saw Fright Night as a teenager, and it's like the appeal of just being empowered to go after the kids that made your life a misery. So there's the hook of vampirism in Fright Night, It's not wine, women, and song. It's the idea that you can get even with all those who have been cruel and have done you wrong. So I think there are many facets to it.
So once again, I'm talking to author Richard Estep, Monsters, Myth, Legends, and Real Encounters, and talking just about vampires. And I think this is like one of the strengths, many strengths of your book, but one of them is talking about just something even like African vampires. And why I bring that up is because sometimes I might have a small mind of, like, when I think of vampires, I only think of like Transylvania or Europe in the 1800s, something like that. But yeah, obviously that's just that's a very outdated way of thinking in terms of that. There's all sorts of these sort of entities all over the planet. Can you talk about African vampires for a second, please?
Yeah, I mean, we have vampire culture here in the West, and there are folks who do literally believe they're vampires. They do literally drink blood from others consensually the majority of the time. But it's demonstrable, right? They're not actually rising from the grave. They're not actually superhumanly powered and things of that nature. But when we get out of the US and the West, as you pointed out, especially into some of these third world nations and developing nations, there is a belief that these things are literally real, and people are killed because of it. Ritual murders. There are vampire hunting squads going on throughout that part of the world. And the phenomenon just looks different. I mean, one aspect of it that really fascinated me was the Indian Shedape, which the Indian vampires are naked women that ride tigers through the night. How has that movie not gotten made, first of all?
Right.
But secondly, when you look into the legend, they usually attack males of the household, and they do it by sticking this long kind of snout, this proboscis kind of down, and usually sucking blood while the men are sleeping. And according to Indian legend, the women that become Shedape are sex workers, or shall we say, not respectable, quote unquote, ladies, according to those cultural beliefs. And when you dig into that belief a bit, it looks a whole lot like just yet another method of repressing women and shaming women, and not to make this political, but a tool of the patriarchy, for men to other and demonize women. So you can kind of see the utility some of these beliefs have had over the years too, which is fascinating.
Absolutely, and that's itself is a whole other conversation about entities or things that are created that actually in truth like keep down like women or other sort of people by itself. That's just that's something else completely different that would be interesting to talk about sometime. That's incredible. I mean, and that's what I like about this book. You're getting in the areas, and I'm gonna admit I don't know a lot of different monsters, and part of me too is I feel like there is like, and I don't know if you run into it, it's like there's a type of creature, let's say a creature, not an entity, and that they exist in other parts of the world, but they're pretty much the same thing. They just have different names, right? I mean, let alone like Bigfoot and Yeti, stuff like that. Yep.
Lake monsters are pretty ubiquitous, sea monsters, things of that nature as well. And there is a great hypothesis that came out of Australia, which makes a lot of sense, that a lot of these lake monsters were a cautionary tale used to frighten away children from the riverbanks where you would fall in and drown. So over and over, we run into the monsters having this utility, this use. Monster stories, served a purpose. So the idea that, you would tell little Timmy, hey, don't go down by the river because there's a sea serpent in there or a lake monster that's going to come out and get you if you get too close to the bank. Well, guess what? In Australia, there are crocodiles. And everything wants to kill you in that country, right? So I was fascinated kind of by that idea too, that we have them in the UK, this idea of riverine monsters, like Morgar down in Cornwall. We have them in the US. We have lake monsters. Canada has its Lake Champlain monster. They're everywhere. They cross cultural boundaries, and it's fascinating.
It's very fascinating. And I don't know. How much, I'm just curious, when you're writing these and you're writing different, you're gathering information, where does your belief system lie in some of these monsters? You approach everything as like, I don't know, I can't say one way or the other, or do you look at any of these like, oh, that's a little, even for me, that's a little bit far-fetched?
I mean, I tend to think most monster stories are far-fetched. However, you get into more recent stuff like Mothman, especially. I wrote a whole book on that, or co-wrote with Tobias Wayland. And I am convinced that I'm not sure that Mothman is literally a thing is out there that I could stand in front of him and slap him on the shoulder. But I'm starting to believe that some of these weirder cryptids may in fact be expressions of one kind of global phenomenon, the kind of stuff John Keel used to talk about, kind of the trickster made manifest. I find that to be a more compelling idea, and I find it a little harder to believe. For example, the Loch Ness Monster, the plesiosaur theories. The loch has always been landlocked, right? How? It just is not possible by any understanding we currently have of the way that marine life has always worked. So, I mean, some of it you just have to jump through so many hoops. It's not believable, in my opinion. But then, you don't want to be the kind of person that sheds so much light on these mysterious dark corners of the world, you suck all the joy out of it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. I don't believe in telling readers what to think, but I'll tell them what I think.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the Loch Ness. Not a whole lot, but I want to get a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. I want to ask you a couple other things regarding your thoughts on the certain monsters that you have written about. And we'll just continue talking. We have author Richard Estep joining us. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Moonstone Minneapolis is a queer-owned, community-focused gift shop in South Minneapolis centered on curiosity, connection, and self-discovery. Explore astrology, tarot, crystals, herbs, mindfulness, and spiritual practices in a welcoming environment for all backgrounds and experience levels. Located at 3304 East Lake Street in Minneapolis, Moonstone Minneapolis also hosts makers markets, classes, and community events. Learn more at moonstoneMPLS.com and discover a welcoming place to explore with curiosity and respect. Greg Bakun here. It's nice to get out of the Twin Cities and take some travel excursion to some great locations. Minnesota has so much to offer, which is why I love traveling down to Wabasha and staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to theandersonhousehotel.com. Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis trolley tours are, but now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures. Perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then, climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis' haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information. Looking for something different for family fun, a night out with friends, or your next team-building event? Try the escape rooms at Lilliput. Step into the haunted mansion, race to find a cure in the bunker, or survive Night of the Wolf, all with just 60 minutes to escape. It's private, immersive, and perfect for groups of all kinds. Book your adventure now, spots fill fast. Visit lilliput.net and see if your team has what it takes to escape. And welcome back to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tonight, my guest is author Richard Estep. We are talking about his book, Monsters, Myth, Legends, and Real Encounters. I'm going to ask Richard real fast how to get a hold of him on social media. And Richard, while you do that, I'm going to readjust my chair that is falling in front of your eyes. I'm not sinking in my house. I just want to let you know that. I keep getting smaller. It's like, hello over here, but I just have a crappy chair. Richard, you don't have a website, though, do you, or anything, right?
I sure do. It's richardestep.net, imaginatively enough. So you can see me there. You can mail me there. Facebook, Richard Estep Author. Instagram, estep.richard. TikTok, Estep Writes, although I'm not much of a TikToker. But yeah, come hit me up on one of those platforms and say hi.
I've never been to your website before. That's why I just wrongly assumed, because you just seem so like everywhere else. I was like, oh, I never thought about you having a website. Well,
a lot of my time goes to Patreon because Patreon's basically my book club. So signing up for that, you get to read stuff as I'm writing it. You know, you get to go behind the scenes on adventures as I'm having them. And then signed copies of books go out usually every 3 months. I put out like 4 books a year. So yeah, that's where I'm most active rather than my website, Patreon.
Isn't it interesting, just as a side note, for I mean, I'm not doing the same amount of travel work or whatever you're doing, but it's our passion, right? And how it's all the time, isn't it? You're traveling and you're always updating your Patreon about what you're doing and everything else, which is fun. But even though we may do the cliche of saying it doesn't even feel like work, it's still a lot, isn't it? It's like you're always on in a sense.
It is. I'm fortunate leading a busy life. I'm a paramedic. I'm also a lecturer. So I argue it uses different parts of the brain. For example, when I read books, some people are reading one book at any given moment, and that's all they can do. They have to focus on that. I read a fiction book and a nonfiction book at any given moment. I maintain they have different parts of the brain, that you use to process them. So by the same token, when I'm lecturing on medicine, or when I'm running 911 on an ambulance, or whether I'm creeping around some haunted building or walking a battlefield, it feels different and it hits different. So it's a different kind of tired, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes total sense.
And it's a fulfilling tired. I think fatigue is a whole lot easier to deal with when it's in a good cause, when it's fulfilling. It feels more honest, if that makes any sense at all, more meaningful.
I think also too is, as generally speaking, that you can take you're in more charge of taking the breaks, even if there's just small ones as well.
Yeah.
The book is called, that we're talking about today, Monsters, Myth, Legends, and Real Encounters. Visible Ink Press had sent me this some time back, and haven't been able to keep our schedules aligned to do this. And this is a beautiful book, by the way. They always do a good job. You always do a good job. Lots of images and stuff in there. I just want to point out to folks, if you want to get this book, one great way to do so is going to your local bookseller, seeing if they can order it in. That way, want to keep all the local places open. One place I would just like to suggest is Moonstone, Minneapolis, because they are just a very small local bookstore in Minneapolis. Also, if you feel like helping out GhostBox, you're more than welcome to use the Amazon affiliated link over at GhostBox Book Club. But however you do so, just do so. And it's a book well worth taking a look at reading, as all of yours are. Rchard, I want to kind of follow up real fast, just from our last segment, talking about Loch Ness. And the reason I want to continue on is, I asked you the questions, do you think there's any that are less believable than others? And in my opinion, Loch Ness Monster is the least believable, quite frankly, for the exact reasons that you had mentioned. And I always thought, well, maybe it's slightly, barely possible that when we started getting the Loch Ness sightings, like reports of it, however hundreds of years ago it was, that there maybe still could have been something alive from that period of time, which doesn't even make sense.
Well, sorry, Greg. Yeah. So when you look at that, the hundreds of years thing is interesting, right? Because there is some urban folklore about it.
Yeah.
That does not really hold up any water, but the lion's share of sightings actually come from the 1920s. And I think this is no coincidence whatsoever. Right around the same time that the biggest movie in the world, bear in mind, cinema was pretty new in the 1920s. Yeah. But any guesses as to what one of the biggest movies out there was at the time the sightings peaked?
Well, it's cited. That would have been Lost World. Oh, it was King Kong in 1931
yeah.
or 19.
So the public is like monsters, and then you start to get this rash of sightings of this monster in Loch Ness. Before that, there's not a whole lot, believe it or not. We have it in our mind that these sightings go all the way back, but again, you have some folklore, but then nothing really compelling and credible that I could find. And things start really warming up in the 20s. They go on up to the Second World War. You get some of these really interesting cases, like the monster seen crossing the road by, a motorcyclist and families in cars and stuff. Some of them don't even describe it looking like the classic plesiosaur design either. One of them describes it as like some kind of weird amorphous blob with a bit of a tail. So you kind of wonder what people are seeing. In World War II, things got a little bit quiet. Then Mussolini, of all people, claimed that the Italian Air Force had bombed and killed the Loch Ness Monster, which they got into a public spat with the Royal Navy over this. So I thought that was fantastic. There was this whole back and forth about the Loch Ness Monster being, bombed out of existence, but also being alive and well. So I thought that was fantastic. Nessie played a very small but interesting role in the World War II propaganda war.
That's amazing.
And then things continue to spike throughout the 20th century. You have the peaks and troughs. As our interest in monsters, waned. I mean, as a kid growing up and watching stuff like In Rchard with Leonard Nimoy, I'm pretty sure the surgeon's photo was in the intro to that. I could be wrong.
No, it was. It was.
Okay. Because it's one of those iconic images, right? There were books, there were all kinds of weird things going on. I wrote about a project where witches and warlocks came down to the loch to try and psychically summon the Loch Ness Monster naked, which when that happened, it brought reporters with cameras, go figure. And again, those sightings continue today. When you delve into it, firstly, what's the food source? I get the argument of, well, there's no carcass because, they sink to the bottom of the loch. Loch Ness being so cold and freshwater, not saltwater, has a reputation, locals say, and this is really sinister, the loch does not give up its dead. In other words, if you or an animal were to drown in Loch Ness, the likelihood is that you will be drawn to the bottom and stay there. So that's the argument that's used. But then, is this supposed to be one fantastically long-lived creature? Is this supposed to be a family, which means there'd need to be a breeding population, which means there'd need to be a significantly bigger food source? And I hate to say it, it wounds me to say it, I don't think it adds up personally.
I would agree. And
I wish it did.
That's just it, right? I don't think any of us don't want it. I mean, that's what's wonderful about the world is that we don't know everything that exists. We don't know everything out there. So the fact that maybe there is a Loch Ness Monster would be great, but then you start thinking it with just the tiniest bit of logic, and it's like, you're right, it doesn't. In Minnesota, we have Lake Pepin, which is south of where I am in the Twin Cities, and so they have a monster. They say there's a monster in the lake there, Peppy of all names. And
I like it.
Absolutely, and it's great for, it's like the war propaganda, but travel propaganda, I guess, to get people out there. It's like Loch Ness does, and but once again, no, probably not, and that's it's too bad. But I don't know if people actually really believe in Pepe like the way people believe in the Loch Ness monster, and that.
You're kind of hitting on something which I find fascinating, and it seems to it's not uniquely a US phenomenon, but I think it's primarily a US phenomenon.
Yeah.
And that is monster tourism. Because Loch Ness itself is out in the, the back end of nowhere. It's not like there is a town sitting right there to profit from it, but there are a number of towns here in the States, where you start looking at them and boy, are they having heydays based upon their monsters, so Van Meter, Iowa, the Van Meter Visitor is a fascinating one. That has a festival every year. The Hodag in Wisconsin, which I wrote about in this book. It's the official state monster of Wisconsin. You have a Hodag's high school football team. So many American towns have kind of actively embraced their monsters. And some, let's be fair, are absolutely milking the idea for every cent that they can. But in this day, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. Monsters are encouraging people to travel, to explore, to adventure, to ask questions. And that sense of wonder. I work with a good friend of mine, and he took his young kiddo squatching, which involved them having watched a couple of Bigfoot documentaries on TV. And going out into the woods, they bought, I believe, a Bigfoot detection kit. I don't know what that entails. And we were talking about this last week, and he said, obviously nothing happened, but it's like, this is me and my daughter having daddy-daughter time doing what she wants to do, and it gets us out into the woods. And we get to go out in nature. And when she's 70 years old, she's going to remember Bigfoot hunting with my dad as a little girl. I mean, how cool is that?
That's very cool. Now, I have to ask, though, why did you say obviously nothing happened?
I feel like the worst way to actually encounter a monster or a ghost or a UFO UAP is to try. Like, all the truly impressive stories involve people that weren't trying. I don't know a lot of ghost hunters or monster hunters that have got great, and then I was looking for it, and there it was, stories. Yeah. So in emergency medicine, we have a saying that the most dangerous thing you can do is mind your own business, because every really spectacular story I've ever heard goes, so there I was minding my own business, and 7 guys jumped me, know?
Very
so
true.
By the same token, I think when it comes to the paranormal, it almost seems to be something about state of mind or consciousness where you're thinking about anything but, and then you have this crazy encounter. So that's why I say, put it in those kind of terms.
No, absolutely. Now, would you mind sharing a little bit of what happened when you went squatching?
Yeah. There's supposed to be, I live in Colorado, my adopted home state. There is supposed to be a portal, if you believe in such things, up near Bailey, which is about 45 minutes outside of Denver. So you're looking at wooded country, foothills of the mountains, a lot of Bigfoot sightings in the area. And indeed, the Sasquatch outpost is there in Bailey. It's a pretty good museum, all things Sasquatch related. And I encourage people to visit if they're in the area. And so I'd gone with a couple of guys that were filmmakers and researchers. They'd made a documentary about it called something like the Bigfoot of Bailey, I believe it was. And they took me out into the woods. It was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. Tried the tree knocking. That didn't seem to work. The further and further we got into the woods, I'm a ghost guy. Like, if you look at my back catalog of books, I'd say 80% of it involves ghosts and hauntings. That's what I grew up on. That's my wheelhouse. So I took some ghost hunting equipment out and got some interesting interactivity going on in a place where we should have seen no stray RF signals or anything like that in the middle of nowhere. And it seemed to be happening on demand, which I thought was interesting. So I'm currently working on a book, you heard it here first, for Llewellyn Worldwide, tentatively titled In Search of Bigfoot, where I kind of took that quest a whole lot further. And I'm fascinated in the psychic, esoteric side of things. There are plenty of good books, probably the best being Dr. Jeff Meldrum's, that Bigfoot is a living, breathing, pooping, world hide-and-seek champion. This hairy humanoid that we've just managed to never catch a single cadaver of ever in all of recorded history, that we don't have any skeletons of, even though, people that adhere to that kind of line of thought, they'll say, well, they bury their dead. Well, you know what? We've had many dinosaur skeletons from millions of years ago, but not one Sasquatch. That smells to me. So the idea that it might be another facet of a similar phenomenon like the Mothman phenomenon is kind of one that I wanted to explore more. And I am fast closing on the end of that manuscript. So I've gone full on weird with my Bigfoot research, and it's been fascinating.
If you are ever interested off show someday down the line, I have done exactly what you have. And over 2 nights, I've had a sighting and actually been touched. And I also use paranormal equipment as well. I'd love to share someday with you. If you are, and it's okay if you're not, my experiences, because they're amazing.
Give me a shot actually after the show, and we'll talk about it, because I'm very much interested in this aspect of things.
Changed my life.
I'm great, because I am convinced that, firstly, the APA theory just doesn't hold water for me. It just doesn't.
No.
Again, where is that single credible piece of physical evidence? But do I believe these things may manifest and be tangible for a period of time? That seems a lot more likely to me the more I dig into it. So yeah, let's talk offline afterwards. I would like to set up an interview.
Absolutely. Let's do that. And speaking of setting up stuff, I need to set up a commercial break right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break, come back, get back on track here with Monsters, Myth, Legends, and Real Encounters, written by author Richard Estep. Great conversation. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com. Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis trolley tours are, but now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures. Perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then, climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis' haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information. Moonstone Minneapolis is a queer-owned community-focused gift shop in South Minneapolis centered on curiosity, connection, and self-discovery. Explore astrology, tarot, crystals, herbs, mindfulness, and spiritual practices in a welcoming environment for all backgrounds and experience levels. Located at 3304 East Lake Street in Minneapolis, Moonstone Minneapolis also hosts makers markets, classes, and community events. Learn more at moonstoneMPLS.com and discover a welcoming place to explore with curiosity and respect. It's that time of year where the weather is getting nice and it's time to get out of the house for some family fun. Lily Putt is open for the season, and you know what that means. Lily Putt is known for its mini golf, go-karts, glow golf, jump pads, kiddie carts, gem mining, and even a new arcade. Lily Putt also has interactive and engaging escape rooms like the Haunted Mansion, the Bunker, or Night of the Wolf. Lily Putt is perfect for parties and group events. Stop by lilyputt.net for more information and hours of operation. Greg Bakun here. It's nice to get out of the Twin Cities and take some travel excursion to some great locations. Minnesota has so much to offer, which is why I love traveling down to Wabasha and staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to theAndersonHouseHotel.com. And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We're going to have on author Jennifer Shortridge as we are going to talk about a book that she wrote last year about ghosts of the Underground Railroad. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating, tragic, and also wistful conversation about that period of time. And I think this is going to be fantastic. So we're going to do that tomorrow. Right now, we are finishing up our conversation with author Richard Estep. We are talking about one of his more recent books. And I forgive me, Richard, I don't remember if you've published anything else since. I think this came out like in April. Monsters.
Yeah, no, it's tough to keep up. My newest book that's out is nothing to do with monsters and has one chapter on ghosts in it. It's called Help Is on the Way, and it's the 25-year autobiography of a 911 paramedic and firefighter.
Thank you for saying that. And that's available all over the place as well?
Yep, published by McFarlane Books.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me on that. And sometimes I have blinders on about all things paranormal doing the show, so it's nice to get those sort of reminders that there is stuff outside of paranormal here, isn't there? Not much. But
there is, but this is a paranormal show, so I totally get it.
It's a paranormal show. When I remember it's a paranormal show, it's a paranormal show. Let's see here. I want to talk a little bit because you brought it up earlier, and I think it's very interesting because I've seen, I've seen like in quotes footage of stuff like this before, which I really, quite frankly, don't believe. The Fresno night crawlers. What is that?
I encourage everyone that's listening to the show or watching the show to go check out the footage. Just Google Fresno Nightcrawler. It is weird with a capital W. And the best way I can demonstrate it here is imagine that you have a security camera and a piece of, it's filming at night, and you essentially have a pair of legs that are kind of walking in a weird, twisting way like this. Could it be a person on stilts? And then there's a second set as well. Could it be a person on stilts? I mean, maybe it could have been faked, but for the life of me, I can't see why. This is not something that anyone ever tried to cash in on or capitalize on that I'm aware of. And there was a second incident that happened shortly afterwards. Well, I believe at a government building in a national or a state park. So this phenomenon just happened. It became a thing. People oohed and awed over it and debated it, and that's kind of it. I have no good explanation for what the Fresno Nightcrawler may have been. It could have been a clever hoax, a prank. It could have been something far weirder than that. I don't know. What do you think, Greg? What's your opinion?
That's the interesting thing, because it's like, it's so unreal. My first instinct is that it's fake. It's so unnatural. Yeah, it's so, and I know exactly the footage you're talking, both of them, both pieces. Because with the second one, isn't there other things that are not that are even like a different to the Nightcrawler as well? The Nightcrawler's there, but there's something else with it or something.
There was like a second one that followed on behind, and it's important to remember too that like this is pre-AI. I mean, if it turned up on your feed today, this is the age we live in now. But this was pre-AI, and could you have done it with CG? I mean, I guess if you had wanted to, I think it would have been something more easy to achieve practically. But even then, it would have to be a fairly clever hoax, And again, why? Like, I don't get the motive, because nobody has come forth to accept responsibility for this at all.
No, the only thing that I always wonder about, because I mean, I saw this on Paranormal Caught on Camera. Mm-hmm. And I get, I feel like that, as good as a show like that can be, to be able to show us, different footage from around the world. And I think it's a great concept. You're going to get those people now. It's like, oh, I want to create a, Fresno Nightcrawler video or whatever. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but to my mind, that's where it goes to, where it's like,
yeah, I think that's very, very reasonable suspicion, Greg. But then the corollary is, but then they usually want some kind of credit for it. To put time and effort in and not get any payoff, unless the payoff is just fooling people anonymously. But I think the vast majority of pranksters want that payoff. They want some notoriety for it. And I haven't seen that with this particular case.
It's interesting that you say that, because last week I had on Aubrey Graves talking about Haunted Disneyland. And it sent me down a rabbit hole, because she said there's videos online about like ghosts walking around the park at night,
Mhm.
and I sounded them out, and there was one walking down the pathway of the haunted mansion and going through a gate, and immediately I'm hook, line, and sinker until the person who put the video together said, this video has now been debunked after 13 years of being out there, that the person finally admitted that they're like some kind of filmmaker, that they actually created this video. And so it's like, is it real? Is it someone doing like a waiting game, or to your point, are they just like, just seeing people be on a radio show talking about it, that's good enough for us? It's interesting, isn't it?
It is, and that's Occam's razor, right? That's the simplest explanation, is that it's a fake.
Yeah.
But I also feel like an investigator or even a folklorist should ask, but if that isn't the case, what then? Otherwise, every single piece of anomalous footage just should end with that.
And to your point, as I'm also a paranormal investigator, and people say to me, why with spirits or ghosts, this or this correlates to this, or I don't believe it because of this, and they're looking for me to give hard answers. I always just also say, it depends on how important it is to you, but it's also a matter of faith. I think, for me, faith in the sense that I believe in spirits. I believe that it's possible.
Well, and here's an interesting thing as I do research on this current Bigfoot book. I have a number of accounts of urban Bigfoot sightings. Like, we're not talking in the woods. We're talking like your subdivision, your neighborhood. We live in a day and age now, 2025, when Americans are on camera at more times in a day than at any other point in human history. Most of us don't know it. You're walking your dog, you trigger a Ring doorbell. You go to an ATM, you go to the store, wherever it may be. Most Americans on an average day are on camera at least 10 times without knowing it. That being the case, where is the influx of apparition footage that we would expect? 10 times the amount of footage is out there, 20 times, 50 times, however much it may be. Where are the very compelling apparition pictures? How does this Bigfoot, this 7 foot tall to 9 foot tall, shaggy, hairy humanoid walk through a subdivision and 2 or 4 people see it and everybody else misses it and every camera misses it? How does that happen? You almost have to, assuming that people aren't making it up and aren't mistaken, if it genuinely is a phenomenon, you have to conclude that there's something about the perception of it that goes beyond the, the mundane nuts and bolts kind of flesh and blood thing. You have to.
It's, you made something click for me when you said that, because when I'm just talking about the Nightcrawler, I'm like, well, it could very well be just something that someone made to get onto Paranormal Con and camera. When you bring up Bigfoot and said what you just said, my mind immediately went through, as an experiencer, well, that's because of this, and this. Immediately in my mind, like I'm going to defend that because I've been through it myself. And I think that's interesting. That's an interesting reaction to it.
It is, but I do think, we have our own biases, of course, and our own beliefs. But the sheer volume of eyewitness testimony is interesting. It is not backed up by. And the other thing I like pointing out is you would have to look very hard to find an American that did not have one of these on their person all the time.
Yep.
You're in the street, you see Bigfoot. You're in the woods, you see Bigfoot. And the amount of footage there is out of all proportion to the amount of eyewitness testimony there is. And as a paranormal investigator, the number of times I've interviewed people that have seen apparitions, and they've said, it literally never occurred to me to take out my phone and film. I was so shocked or flabbergasted. I was momentarily kind of frozen. Or the opposite. It was so mundane, I didn't realize what I was looking at until it was too late.
That's interesting. And then the interesting part about that is that, you see people all the time. They're in the middle of a burning building and they're shooting their camera just so they can get it like on TikTok or something. So it is a different sort of thing when you're like, well, then why aren't they picking, like if people don't care about their safety in a burning building, why do they care about their safety in a forest with something that they can't explain right in front of them?
Yeah, I've been in a few burning buildings in my time, and I am kind of very cognizant being in the woods of, the thing that worries me most is not Bigfoot, it's mountain lions and bears.
Yes.
So always go squatching. This is my pro tip from someone who's done it exactly 3 times. Always go squatching with someone you can outrun.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Well, and when I've gone out last time, one of the last few times, that was my first thing too. Is I don't know, just anything out there that I'm not aware of, or even people. Like if you're going into like a wilderness or something, and it's like, who knows that there's just people out here. You got to be, you have to be careful.
It's not at all unknown for people to go out there into the boonies and decide it's their own personal target range, and blast off a few rounds from their AR-15. So you never know.
No, you don't know. Now, as we have just less than 5 minutes left in the book, once again, it's called Monsters, Myth, Legends, and Real Encounters. I want to ask real fast, was there one monster in particular or a couple that you were like, when I'm writing this book, I cannot wait to get to this particular monster?
I was fascinated by all of them in different ways. The Flatwoods Monster was one that kind of spoke to me. I just love the idea that this thing, which you could just as easily paint as like an alien as a monster, that it happened at the height of the US, like they came from outer space. It came from outer space kind of craze, the alien invasion craze. And that you have this kind of monster story that sounds like that very thing happened in the middle of the rural US. So I think the Flatwoods Monster is one that really spoke to me because it seems to be so of its time. And there is a Flatwoods Monster Museum even today. It's a monster that is beloved in the area where the case took place. So I'm going to go with that one. It's not as well known as it should be, but its look is very iconic. Like once you see it, you would remember it, and I think again, it's kind of like a time capsule of the US as it was back in the day.
I'm looking in your book right now, and I'm seeing it, and you're right. It kind of does have a kind of an alien look to it as well. Yeah, very,
very distinctive.
Very distinctive. And I think also I love the idea too. And we have about just about 3 minutes left here. I love the idea, and you bring it up, the pride that some of these, these towns, they have for their monsters. Up the road from me is a town that is all about Bigfoot. Whether or not they can't claim it as theirs, but they claim it as a lot of sightings and stuff. I love the pride that towns have for their monsters.
Me too. I think that monsters will always fascinate, no matter what your age are, whether you are 8 to 80 years of age. We all love a good monster story, right? And the truly, I like the word monster. I feel like though monster and monstrous, like we say something is monstrous, and that tends to be associated with things human beings do. John Wayne Gacy was a monster and he was monstrous. So I kind of actually like the way that cryptid is taking over as a term, just because it's not tainted by its association with vile human beings. We should be proud of our monsters. We should be fond of them, and they do a lot for us.
They do. They really do, actually. And we have under 2 left. Was there one that you were surprised about, or that doing the research, whether you found out something that is like blew you away, or just that it's like, okay, no, I actually like this a lot more now?
I don't know that I liked any of them more after having done it, but there were lots of surprises out there. I mean, I took a deep dive into the monsters of Australia, particularly. The forward is written by an Australian, Dr. Karen Stolzno, co-host of Monster Talk. And so learning that the Australians have their own version of Bigfoot called Yowie, I thought that was kind of cool, because if you are going to buy into the physical theory, probably Australia is the last continent where it could be really believable. You still have these like miles and miles of untouched by humanity wilderness. So Yowie is a little bit more believable to me than North American Bigfoot would be.
And Yowie is such a great name.
Yeah. It's the noise you make when you step on a Lego at 2 a.m.
That's great. And it's true, actually, as well. Or the noise my cat makes when I accidentally step on her tail at night. She meowie, actually, is what she says. So there you go. Real fast, are you working on anything? I mean, that's the dumbest question I think I've ever asked on the radio show to someone. Of course you're working. You're probably working on 16 books right now, for all I know.
I am. I'm working on, for Llewellyn, I'm working on In Search of Bigfoot, which very much the same format as my Mothman book for them. For Visible Ink, I'm working on a book about spies and espionage. No ghosts or monsters there.
Nice.
But I have a book coming out in September for Visible Ink, The United States of Ghosts, which is a haunted history of the U.S. So a history of the U.S. is told through the lens of our ghost stories. And then last but by no means least, I'm working on a classic haunted location book, because it's been too long since I put one out. That book is about the haunting of the Oliver House in Massachusetts, co-authored with historian Dr. Joanna McGuggad. So 3 manuscripts on the go right now.
I am looking forward to reading all of them. Rchard Estep, thank you very much for your time today. And once again, the book is called Monsters, Myth, Legends, and Real Encounters. Rchard, thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. Always a pleasure.
And we'll be back tomorrow talking about the ghosts of the Underground Railroad. Everyone, have a great night.